Welcome to another episode of Digital Detox Secrets. Today's guest is Christina Crook, and she is the author of The Joy of Missing Out, JOMO. So that is quite the opposite of FOMO, fear of missing out. So in this episode, Christy and I dig in and talk about all of the different ways to find the art of finding balance in a wired world. And what better timing than 2020 when we have never been more attached to digital than ever before. The struggle is definitely real to find balance in this digital world. And Christina and I talk about some actionable ways that you can do it and some apps that she loves and some of her favorite sources. So welcome, Christina, and we are going to be talking about JOMO. Hi, Christina, and welcome to Digital Detox Secrets. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, what a time to talk about digital detox secrets, and you're here to talk about the joy of missing out. And I feel like we're in this detox type of, or toxic actually type of year, and we're missing out on a lot.
We are missing out on a lot. That was the great irony at the beginning of COVID, was people were like, this is the perfect moment for JOMO, although we are, we're being forced to miss out on certain things. But definitely an interesting conversation about digital and the right things to miss out on during COVID.
Yeah. So tell us about Joy of Missing Out, what it's all about, and how did you get into this line of this topic?
Yes. Well, I am a student of communication theory. So I'm actually originally from Vancouver in Canada, and I studied at Simon Fraser University and started my career at the CBC, so our public broadcaster, like your NPR in America. And I was really keyed in because of my studies, but also just sort of a natural noticer to the ways in which email and then social media was beginning to encroach on my own life and my own relationships, but also more importantly on the culture at large. And so my grandmother was a newspaper clipper, like an old school grandma, and she would always clip articles for me. And I started this practice myself of collecting, sort of amassing this collection of articles about this growth and sort of, almost like overtaking of our lives of the digital experience. And so I decided to give up the internet for 31 days. It was a little experiment I called Letters from a Luddite. I actually, instead of being online, I wrote a letter each day on an old typewriter to the same friend in Vancouver. I was living at Toronto at that point, which is where I live now, and mailed them across the country each day. And I was recording to her the experience of what it was like offline, the challenges, the frustrations, the incredible epiphanies, the wide open mental space. I finally had the creativity, the creative juices that were flowing even with young kids underfoot. And I wrote off of that experiment for a number of publications, and my publisher actually approached me to expand off of that into a book. That book was originally titled Digital Detox. And at the last moment, about a couple of months before the official publication date, we had to change the title for a legal reason. And it was renamed The Joy of Missing Out. And I have been grateful every single day that happened, because I really love how it reframes the conversation from being about the removal of something, and the joy of missing out reframes it as, like, what joys can we step into when we disconnect. So that was a long introduction, but that is the way I came into this work.
What year was that you took the 30-day hiatus?
Oh man, it was a long time ago now. It was like 2013, I think. And then the book came out in 2015. So sort of like people call me sort of a digital well-being pioneer, because my book was sort of ahead of this, what feels like now a global conversation.
It is definitely more so because of the pandemic. It's actually been brought to everybody. Mindfulness and being aware and meditation has never been more. I mean, if you look at Google Trends, it's probably, the search activity in Google has probably increased and spiked since March of this year. And I think it's almost like, I feel like it's become commercialized, but not really. I think that you could look at it that way, but it's really just become a movement.
Mm-hmm. It has. And that's been the incredible, beautiful thing. And I think there's so many different voices and people coming to the challenge and also the opportunity of how we can live well with technology from all over the world, whether it's academics or artists, filmmakers with the brand new movie, The Social Dilemma, that just came out, just all these people engaging in this conversation. And for me, it's just been so exciting to be a part of it.
I did something similar. It wasn't in 2013, but it was probably 2014 or 2015. And there's actually a chapter in Digital Detox Secrets about a similar experience that I went through with my daughter, who's now 18, but at the time she was probably 13. And I just realized how social media and Snapchat and just the pressure of FOMO and fear of missing out was kind of taking over her and becoming like this like obsession with her and her friends. And I was witnessing her being basically taken down, going from, somebody that was, very engaging and very, very interactive to be very distracted and very withdrawn and very, looking at her phone constantly. And a couple of things happened and I decided, okay, you know what, I'm taking your phone away for 7 days. And I think it ended up being 14 days. And the experience of that, it was almost like watching somebody that was like an addict, like a heroin addict, going through like the first couple of days, like such bad withdrawal and very angry and very upset. And, then all of a sudden getting to a point of acceptance. And then by the end of the period where she had no phone and really no internet connection, because it was summer, all of a sudden it was like, oh, Mom, I'll go with you for a walk on the beach, or I'll go with you here. And she was having like conversations with me for the first time. And, it seemed like a long time, like that just I got robbed of the interaction and the engagement because she was so distracted and being so taken down by what was happening, with her friends that she wasn't part of or something. And at the very end, she ended up writing me a letter thanking me, and I still have it. And it's like, I think I printed part of it in the book, and it just is like this, it's like you don't realize how digital is working against you, but it also today you can't live without it. So it's like, how do you today balance that out?
For me, my focus is really on deepening our connections to the real world. It's less about limiting tech in all of its various forms and being so deeply connected to the things that we love to do, the people we love to be with, so that the draw to being offline is stronger than being online. So I don't have rules about, hours spent, or I do have, strategies around different tools and things that I believe work well for many people. But in terms of hours logged, I think that I have sort of this parameter where I believe that you should be spending the majority of your hours offline than online. Like that's a good check. If you're spending the majority of your waking hours, like 14 hours, 16 hours online, and only like 4 off, maybe if you're lucky, counting showers, eating, whatever it is, then I think we've got a problem. But for me, it's really less about the sort of limiting of tech as it is like finding those things that feel really good. I often tell about this story of this family I know that's in the capital of Canada, which is Ottawa. And they're a family that loves to skate. And in the winter, it freezes over. There's a canal there that freezes over. And every Sunday afternoon, they go out and they go skating as a family. And they go for these things called beaver tails after, which are these cinnamon, they're kind of like churros, but like giant churros, like cinnamon and sugar and pastry. And they have the best time. And the kids, range from teens to sort of like 8 years old. And that family, none of the kids are asking for iPads, right? None of the kids are asking for their phone because they're so immersed in having such an incredible time. And I think if we can build our lives in a way where those experiences are built into our everyday life, those things we look forward to, then having that balance is a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think that we're especially more challenged now because of
Of course.
everything has gone to e-learning and everything in person that we knew existed, has been taken away from us for the most part. I mean, we're getting little bits and pieces back, but it's especially hard, I think, for anybody that's working in the digital marketing space, public relations, social media marketing, and then also, the e-learning, it's like you almost can't not have your phone in front of you while you're on this screen, the computer, and maybe there's something happening in the background too, and then there's the wearables. So it's like, in today's world, I think it's hard not to spend 8 hours or the majority of your time with digital around you. So if you have to do that, what are some strategies that we can apply?
I mean, some strategies probably your listenership has heard over and over again, but these are the ones that I always share is beginning and ending your day, without technology. So beginning your morning, whether it's with movement or it's with journaling, but sitting in quiet, getting that sort of framing of the day, setting the pace and your sort of mindset for the day without that instant pull into the urgent of our phones and our feeds and our email boxes. So maybe the first half an hour, if that's, the starting step for you, but I would encourage even more like an hour before you dive into your inbox. All those things are waiting for you. Getting into a deep workflow earlier in the day, if that's when you're most creative and you're sharpest, but prioritizing that creative period in your day for doing more focused work. So I'm writing a new book right now, and I am the best early in the morning. So I have to protect that time to get that in, and then I switch gears into all the emailing and all of the digital stuff later in the day. I'm on my computer earlier to write, but you know what I mean. And then the end of the day, right? Unwinding with, again, to make it as easy as possible for you, having books on your nightstand that aren't the should books, the books you're like, I should read that for work, or I should, a good person would read this book. I have so many of those books. I've learned to throw them away, but having a book that like you truly are excited to dive into on your nightstand makes it that much easier, to reach for that versus your phone or Netflix. So those are just a couple of my tips.
Yeah, I also think that we've made progress with social media. The social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram are and Snapchat are, and they're trying to take part in helping recognize, okay, this is how much time you've spent, and take a pause and take a break, and helping with the mental health and wellness of what social media does to your brain and to your body and to your social life, and how it can actually be, it's called social media, but it can also be very antisocial.
Absolutely. I love the feature in Twitter where it says, you're all caught up. You never see that in Instagram or Facebook, even though they're getting better. But I love that feature in Twitter where it's like, oh, you've actually caught up on all the information that's new here. And then it's just like such a perfect prompt to move on to something new. It's such a great point that these design principles, right, really shape our day-to-day experience. And yes, we can create our own alarms and try and create our own strategies around these things, but ultimately the platforms are built in ways to make us spend as much time as possible there, right? And I'm sure your listeners know this because this is the theme of your podcast, Digital Detox, but really understanding that their ultimate goal is as much time and attention as possible to sell you as many products as possible, right, through ads and also data collection. So understanding that when you go into this space, like, yes, this is a tool, I can connect, I can learn some things, but also I need to move on with my day and get on to other things.
Yeah, that was actually one of the points that I brought up in that chapter I was referring to in Digital Detox Secrets, when I was, and immersing myself into basically saving my daughter from being taken down by social, was that Facebook and Snapchat and Twitter, they hire the programmers that are designed to figure out how to get into your brain and get you addicted to these apps, just like gamers, get addicted to gaming, and that's their whole point. So, it's a double-edged sword because, I have a social PR agency, and that's how I make my living. And I also, I'm trying to protect my mental health and wellness, and, stay on that side in that lane as well. But speaking of social media platforms, and I'm interested to hear how you use social media to, or what you did to actually promote your book, and what were some of the best ways that you found to get in front of your audience.
Ah, such a great question. I purposely didn't have a social media strategy when my book was released because I did not see a way that I could, with integrity, promote this book that was about disconnecting from the internet on the internet. So my publisher did do a very good job of getting me in front of mainstream press when the book released through classic, PR channels, radio, print, etc., television. But I did not have social accounts for a long time. And to be honest, it has kind of nipped me in the bud because uh, people want people with platforms. This is your business. You completely understand this. Publishers, for instance, want to have some guarantees around sales of books. And so they want to see that an author has, oh, there was
Sorry.
just an alert. They want to see that an author is bringing a certain number, right, of followers to their whatever, to the marketing
Sorry,
campaign. It's okay. I'll stop.
hold on one sec. We can edit this.
Perfect.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know if it's going to go off again, but that's super interesting. So if you could just start over with
Sure.
that, because I just
Yeah.
feel like that is.
So when my book was first released, my publisher did a really great job with traditional, PR efforts around radio and television and print. But I didn't see a way to, with integrity, promote the book on social media and build a social following. And so I intentionally did not do that for a number of years. And I had some creative solutions around that. I did have an email list and I had a free prompt that people could get called Daily JOMO, which was a playful prompt to get people offline and reconnecting to the joys of the real world. People loved that. That was really fun, but it was less in your face as social is. And obviously there were permissions around, people giving me their email address. But it was actually watching the Mr. Rogers documentary that came out about 2 years ago now. I came out of watching that in a theater with one of my closest friends here. I live in the west side of Toronto on this little independent theater. And I came out and I thought to myself, okay, so Mr. Rogers created his show because television at that time was absolute garbage for children. It was like GI Joe and like people smashing pies in people's faces, and it was like low brow, non-educational content. And Mr. Rogers could have made it his lifelong, mission to be anti-television, to be anti-children's programming, but instead he went into television and created an alternative. And I had a lot of conviction actually coming out of watching that documentary where I was like, okay, so the people that need my message the most are actually on social media. They're actually addicted to social media. And I have a responsibility to be there to engage them with my message. And so it wasn't until about a year and a half ago that I actually started to have a social media strategy and plan. And it was Experience JOMO and it was all JOMO all the time. But I've recently just rebranded as Christina Crook because I want to expand sort of my offerings. My next book is not explicitly JOMO, although it picks up on all these, themes about what it means to be human in a digital age. But I do have a social media strategy and I have a team that works on it. And it's so weird, but it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. And there's authors like Elizabeth Gilbert and Gretchen Rubin that really do a great job at using their Facebook and Instagram pages as to interact and engage. And sometimes I'm just like, they do such an amazing job, but I'm just like, how do they do it? Like, they have to have people behind them, but it comes across very personalized
Yeah.
and very relationship building. So, it is like you just have to find that balance, especially from an author standpoint, to really, engage with your audience and use social as best as you can without it, kind of taking over you. What is your next book?
So my next book is going to be called Good Burdens, Reclaiming Effortful Living as the Path to Joy. So I've made this connection between attention and effort, and those two things needing to be present for joy to occur in our lives. So we can be in the most beautiful place in the world, but if we're not attentive to what's happening, we can completely miss it. And we can be watching a really awesome show on Netflix, but it's very passive. It's not effortful. And that doesn't really give us like that full satisfaction feeling that we get from joy. And so I'm talking about these good burdens, these things that we do that once we get across a certain threshold of effort, like creating a meal for loved ones for Thanksgiving, right? Very effortful, a lot of work, quite burdensome. But once you get across a certain threshold of effort and everyone's at the table and enjoying that meal, right? It's so meaningful. There's so much joy and that burden disappears. So that's a good burden. So that's what the new book is about. And I'm extremely excited about it. Actually, a lot of the interviews that I've done on my podcast, the JOMO cast, with mindful tech leaders, all from, from Basecamp to WeTransfer to Harvard professors, talking about all of these different ways in which we can balance our lives with technology, will be making their way into this new book. So yeah, I literally signed last week, so it's quite exciting.
Well, you'll have to keep us posted for sure.
Yeah.
And speaking of your podcast, what are some of your favorite interviews? And we'll put the links to them in the show notes, but tell us about some of your favorite interviews and why, and maybe some gleans of
Yes. Okay, that's so generous. So Ellen Langer, who's at Harvard, she was the first tenured psychology professor that was a woman at Harvard ever. And I had her on the podcast. She's basically considered the mother of mindfulness. She popularized mindfulness way back in the 70s and created an entire area of research around that. So that's one of my favorite episodes. And that's really where this like attention and effort piece came together for me. So I highly recommend that. She's hilarious. It was right at the beginning of COVID. She's like a fireball. I sent her my interview question. She was like, I don't like them. We're not doing that. I was like, you go, girl. You tell me what's up. I was like, we can talk about whatever you want. So that was a fantastic episode. I have a friend who's got a couple of wildly successful social media accounts. One is called Effin Birds. Maybe some of your listeners have heard about it. They're gorgeous old drawings of birds, like historic drawings of birds with swears on them. He's making gazillions of dollars from this insane idea. And he was on the podcast and we talked about JOMO for the very online, because his life is 100% online. Like he's never not on the internet. And he's got another account called Swear Trek, where it's Star Trek, but also with swearing. Apparently he likes swearing a lot. That's a really fun, playful episode. Very different, obviously, from the Ellen Langer episode. And one more. My very first interview ever was with my friend Salima Ibrahim, who's the co-founder of a startup called Artery. And Artery's, you kind of think of it as like Airbnb meets Eventbrite. So people list spaces. It could be any kind of space, whether it's a loft or a backyard, and they pair the people with their spaces with performers, and they do these intimate showcases all over the world. And it was growing like crazy before COVID hit. And this interview was done before COVID. But their mission, although it is like a very wildly successful startup, is really to decrease loneliness. Like that is their actual mission, is to increase connection locally for people. So like you look up on Artery, what's happening tomorrow night? Oh, there's a jazz musician playing like 2 blocks down the road. You're probably going to meet a neighbor, and that starts to build more local connection. So that's called, I think, The Joy of Missing Out on Loneliness with Salima Ibrahim.
What do you say to college students today about the joy of missing out? They're basically, grew up on digital and don't know the difference.
I think honestly, they're more hungry for it than any of us. My cousin Natalie is an actress in Vancouver. She was on Flash. She's on tons of big shows, and she will, she's 22 years old. She'll walk into acting classes and everybody's staring down at their phones. And she's like, I wish there was something I could just say to them to snap them out of it that's like socially acceptable. And so her and I talk about strategies to just sort of like upend that habitual way of being, just spark a conversation with one person. And, eventually other people will possibly get engaged, but really you have to lead by example if you want more of that connection in your life. It's going to require discomfort. It's going to require you to do something that feels uncomfortable, but the gains are 100% worth it. And it sucks right now. It sucks that we have to mostly do our connecting like this, and thank God for Zoom. And I'm more grateful for the internet than I ever have been before, during COVID, because my family is all over the world. We can't be together. It's really hard. But I think that I would say to a college student is really to nurture just a couple of like deep, close friendships. Like if you have one or two close friendships that are like actually real, where you can reach out to someone like I did with my friend Emily yesterday and was like, I just am having an off day. Like I need to talk about it. Like if you have one or two of those people in your life, like that is gold. It's like the most precious thing in the world. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I think it makes me think of also, kind of the flip side of college students. So people that are in the age bracket of my mom, and I noticed this happening too, where they definitely did not grow up on digital, but because of COVID and because of the situation, like you said, fear of missing out or joy of missing out on loneliness, I think that loneliness is a big deal, and people are turning to maybe, Facebook as their way of their connection of to their friends and family and to the world, where it actually is having it's isolating them even more, and not really allowing them to, like you said, pick up the phone and talk to a friend. Or it's almost like the connection of social media is like the only connection, and then the next connection might be text. Like who calls people anymore? It's kind of scary.
It's totally scary. You think someone's dead.
Yeah.
My brothers only call me when they're having a baby or getting married. I have 5 brothers. They never call me. They call me. I'm like, must be having a baby. Like I don't even need to
Right.
answer.
Something's definitely wrong. And it's almost like rude to call somebody without having some sort of an appointment or letting them know ahead of time, hey, can you talk? Like it's just, it's it's just so different, but it's actually
Yeah,
kind of sad.
it is sad. I think it's cool to pick up the phone sometimes and just call someone. I've had some of my best conversations calling people out of the blue, and them thanking me, So I think it's worth it sometimes, but it's true. It does sort of like elicit this panic response for most people.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite apps that you want to share, or sources, books besides your book?
Yes. Okay, so I need to talk. I'm looking behind me, but I need to talk to the microphone. One sec. Because I keep most of my most favorite books close to me. There's an amazing book by Wendell Berry called What Are People For? It's much more of a philosophical book, but I love that book. It's essays. He's a farmer, poet, philosopher, and he has the most thoughtful essays. So that book is What Are People For? I did really enjoy Tiffany Schlane's book 24/6, The Power of Unplugging One Day a Week. Tiffany was on the podcast and we're friends. I was in New York for her show recently at the Museum of Modern Art. One more. There's a magazine in the UK called Idler, and it's all about being idle. And it's put out by Tom Hodgkinson, and he also wrote a book called How to Be Idle. It's mostly satirical, tongue in cheek, kind of pushing us to consider our always on culture. It's really fun. It's a really fun magazine. So those are my three.
Awesome. And what about any apps that you are kind of help you?
Oh, well, Freedom is an app that I am playing around with a little bit and I'm liking the experience. So it's one of those distraction free apps that is, lets you block whether it's a half an hour or a full day. You can set, if you have a paid account, you can set up, regular intervals of focused work. I'm really enjoying that. If people want to check it out, they can check out freedom.to/JOMO because right now they are sponsoring the podcast.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, which is really, really awesome. They're great, great guys. And honestly, I don't use a lot of apps for this problem. Do you mean just like apps in general though?
Yeah, or apps in general.
Okay. What else have I got? I'm picking up my phone. Okay. I use AnyList for my groceries. I have found that to be hugely effective, and I share it with my husband. That's been really good. I use LastPass for all of my passwords, which is fantastic.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'll
Um,
have to check it out. I use 1Password for my passwords.
cool. Yeah. Okay, and here's another funny one. Guitar Tuna, like Tuna. It's for tuning your instruments. I've been learning the ukulele over Zoom during COVID, and you can just open up this app and just set it beside you, and you plunk your little, on the instrument, and it will tell you if you're in tune or not, and then you adjust it, and then it makes a happy little pling, and it means that you're tuned, which I thought was hilarious. There's an app for
That's
that.
awesome. That's awesome. Well, Christina, where can we find you and find out about your next book and follow you? Where are the best places?
The best place is ChristinaCrook.com, where you'll find everything with the podcast, my book. I have got a digital well-being membership that I've just really launched. So you can find everything there. My social channels. So ChristinaCrook.com, the JOMO cast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you really want to dig more in specifically to JOMO, then you can go to experiencejomo.com, where it's got all the stuff around the movement there.
I want to experience JOMO.
Me too.
That's top of my list. I'm gonna go check out all of those links, but we will also put them in the show notes. And I really appreciate you sharing all your digital detox secrets and some social PR secrets on how you use social to market and launch your book and all of your offerings. So Christina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Lisa.
Namaste. Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Social PR Secrets. If you like what you heard, check out the book on Amazon or follow our blog at socialprsecrets.com. This episode was sponsored by the Buyer Group, a social PR agency striving to keep our balance in the digital world, practicing public relations, social media, and search marketing, while occasionally drinking a glass of wine or two for the best creativity and results. Thank you all for tuning in. If you would like to get a free chapter of Social PR Secrets, go to socialprsecrets.com/free.